For 3,096 days, this was her entire universe. An 8 square meters cell, hidden beneath an ordinary house, locked away from the sun, from her family, from life itself. How does a 10-year-old girl simply vanish on her way to school? How does her childhood get stolen and squeezed into a room smaller than a parking space? It all started with a single, fateful argument. If she could turn back time, she never would have talked back to her mother. Because of one slap, a furious 10-year-old Natascha decided to walk to school alone. But on that quiet street, a white van was waiting. She was violently dragged inside. The only witness was another young girl, watching in silence. When Natascha woke up, she was here. In this empty 8 square meters prison, the wooden door was locked tight. Her screams for help just echoed back at her. Her only link to the outside world was a small exhaust fan on the wall. She gathered all her strength and shouted into it, praying for rescue. But the sound that came back wasn't a savior. It was the sound of her kidnapper, opening the door. He tossed in a narrow mattress, a thin blanket, a piece of bread, and a bottle of water. This was her new life. Then he shut the door and killed the power. For the first time ever, she would spend the night completely alone, in suffocating darkness, without her mother's embrace. On the third day, the man brought a box of cookies. To survive, she did what she had to. She obediently licked the cheese off the crackers and listened quietly as he read her fairy tales. In a desperate attempt for any kind of human connection, she even asked him for a goodnight kiss, just like her mother used to. Meanwhile, her real mother was living a waking nightmare. Natascha's face was all over the news. Every day, she prayed for information, terrified that it would be the worst kind. To fight the crushing boredom, Natascha measured the room with her feet, over and over. She created imaginary friends out of 2 pieces of clothing, playing teacher to pass the hours. She was only 10. Perhaps she didn't fully grasp how hopeless her situation was. She wrote a letter to her mother, full of love and coded pleas for help, begging the man to mail it. But Natascha's strong spirit refused to break, and this terrified him. He needed to crush her hope completely. He lied, telling her that her parents refused to pay the ransom, that they didn't want her anymore because she wasn't worth it. With every harsh word and rough action, he tried to sever her connection to the outside world, to break her mind and her body. This man was meticulous. His fortress was perfectly designed. To leave the basement, he'd crawl through a tiny opening, then block it with a safe and heavy cabinets. He'd even remove his shoes and jacket, making sure not a single trace of Natascha could ever be found on him. He was ready for the police. And soon, they came. Following the tip from the girl who saw the abduction, 2 officers showed up at his door. They knew they were looking for a white van. They made him open it for inspection. But after more than 10 days, he'd had plenty of time to scrub it clean. The police were so close. They were standing directly on top of her prison. If they had just listened a little closer, been a little more suspicious, but they weren't. 2. And just like that, her best chance for rescue vanished. If that hope gone, the darkness in the basement felt heavier than ever. To prove to herself she was still alive, she bravely asked the man for a clock, and he used this to tame her. Be obedient, and small requests might be granted. She used chalk to draw a little cat on the wall for company, and a lock on the door, a symbol of the freedom she dreamed of. At just 10 years old, she was already plotting her escape. She smeared toothpaste on her arm, faking an injury, hoping he'd take her to a doctor. But he saw right through it. To prove to her that escape was a fantasy, he dragged her to the exhaust fan and made her scream, forcing her to hear how silent her cries were to the outside world. He then let her step outside the wooden door, showing her the maze-like fortress he had built. His message was clear: you will never leave. But he underestimated her. The books he brought were dense and difficult, but she forced herself to read, to keep her mind sharp. As punishment for her escape attempt, he cut off her food for 4 days. Her pleas for mercy were met with 2 cold words:
obey me.
For 4 years, he brainwashed her like this. Starvation kept her weak, too weak to run. Her only window to the world was a battered old radio. Lying in bed, she would listen for hours, learning about the world she was no longer a part of. On day 1690, a 5-year-old Natascha faces a new kind of anxiety. At a time when a girl needs her mother most, she was mocked by her captor. He called her filthy and dirty. He eventually let her shower upstairs, but this wasn't an act of kindness. It was another layer of control. He told her the entire house was rigged with explosives. One wrong move, and they would both die. For 4 years, she had dreamed of this moment climbing out of that hole. The light from the hallway was just a floor to a normal person. To her, it was an unreachable heaven. One day, the man's grandmother found a blonde hair on his sweater and asked if he had a girlfriend. This sent him into a paranoid rage. In his world, she had no dignity, no identity. She was his object. On day 1837, she had her first Christmas upstairs. He gave her a Walkman and 2 books. For a moment, she was ecstatic. Reading was her escape, her strength. But the festive mood made her ache for her family. When she asked about them, he snapped.
You don't have a family anymore. Do you understand? Because I am your family. I am everything to you, because I created you.
You are no longer Natascha. Your name is Bibiana. And for the first time in 5 years, she learned his name, Wolfgang. All this time, her real family never stopped searching. For 5 long years, they clung to the hope that she was alive. Her mother was drowning in guilt, replaying that morning over and over. If only she hadn't slapped her. If only she had walked her to school. Slowly, Wolfgang's control shifted. He began letting her out of the basement, sometimes even letting her sleep in his room. But freedom was an illusion. At night, he would tie them together with zip ties to prevent her from running. She became his maid, a slave who would be met with fists and feet for the smallest mistake. He started letting his guard down, taking her on short trips outside. But his warning was always the same. Make one wrong move, and you'll regret it. Still, Natascha never gave up. On day 2093, she was in a public place for the first time, a hardware store. Wolfgang left her alone in an aisle. This was it, her chance. All she had to do was run to a store clerk, scream for help. But what would you do? After years of torture and brainwashing, fear paralyzes you. While she fought the war in her mind, Wolfgang was already walking back. The moment was gone. On day 2175, she heard a news report about her own disappearance on the radio. The world hadn't forgotten her. That same day, Wolfgang told her why he took her. He had just been fired, and 10-year-old Natascha made a funny face at him on the street. It cheered him up. So he spent 2 months meticulously planning to steal her life. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it sent her spiraling into despair. For the first time, she thought about ending her own life, but her survival instinct was too strong. When Wolfgang found out, he beat her again. Silently, she memorized every detail of every beating. It became her fuel. It would be her evidence. On day 2847, a second chance, he took her skiing. In a public restroom, she tried to ask another woman for help. But they didn't speak the same language. The woman just smiled and walked away. Another door slammed shut. Finally, On day 3096, 8.5 years later, Wolfgang decided to sell the white van, the very same vehicle that dragged her into hell. He had Natascha help him clean it to get a better price. She never imagined that the instrument of her damnation would become the key to her salvation. While she was vacuuming, she noticed the gate to the yard was unlocked. Just then, Wolfgang's phone rang. The vacuum was too loud, so he stepped inside the house to take the call. This was the moment. No hesitation, not this time. She cranked the vacuum to full power. Then, she bolted. Through the iron gate she had stared at for years. 8 years in a basement had wasted her body away, but her will to live? It exploded with incredible force. She ran into a neighbor's yard, screamed at an old woman in a window to call the police. Minutes later, they arrived. When they asked who she was, she used every last ounce of strength to say the words she had practiced in her mind 1,000,000 times.
My name is Natascha Kampusch. I was kidnapped 8 years ago.
3,096 days. For her mother, every phone call for 8.5 years had been potential torture. But this one was salvation. The first word she heard was the one she had longed for. Mom. As for Wolfgang, when he realized she was gone, he didn't even try to chase her. He walked calmly to a nearby train track and ended his own life. This film is based on a true story. The real Natascha Kampusch, after regaining her freedom, wrote a book to share her ordeal. He thought he could break her, erase her, and own her. But he failed to see that within that tiny, fragile body was an unbreakable will to survive. Natascha did more than just escape. She outlasted her captor. In her own powerful words, which echo as a testament to her strength, it was clear that only one of us could survive. In the end, it was me, not him.